can do, and you, the public, we're not having much success. So you're the person who's going to vote this year. And you ask the incumbent, what have they done over the last 4 years, and ask them what they're going to do. And that's going to be important.
Can I just second what Dr. Solomon said about the policing issue? I don't think policing is going to be a problem for one very simple reason. The bylaw, the ban will be very popular. And that's what we've seen in other provinces, and that's what the polling shows us here in Newfoundland and Labrador. When you have about 70% of people supporting something, policing isn't an issue because people want the legislation.
Yeah, I just want to say a word about enforcement. The regulations that exist now, for pesticide spraying are not enforced because there are only 2 or 3 or 4 people for the entire province trying to police these regulations with regard to wind and weather and distance from people's houses and signage. The regulations as they exist are not enforced because there are no enforcement officers to do it. I mean, we have Newfoundland and Labrador, a huge area, and I think the last time I checked last summer there were 3, or perhaps 4 officers. And I've made many complaints, and it's impossible to get any action because there's no one to do it. So I don't think policing will be a problem if these substances were banned. I think it would be a lot simpler if they were banned.
Yeah, but also with municipalities, like I said about the 6 inches of topsoil, if the lines were put down right at the beginning, there wouldn't be a need for as much pesticide use as is being happened. So we pushed to have this bylaw in, but the bylaw itself is not even policed. And I know for a fact because I have several customers that had that problem. So it's not only the apartment environment, we all have to get together and figure out the way to do it properly, right from the very beginning. Even the way construction is done. We rake the landscape. We take away all the soil, all the trees, then we put back a little bit of crap, throw a bit of sod on and hope for the best. So if even that was done properly in the very beginning. So zoning and all that stuff has to be considered. It's a bigger topic when you really think about it.
Absolutely.
Just banning it is just banning it. We have to go deeper and change the way we're doing a lot of things.
Well, thank you for that. And I'm going to actually let another person come up to the mic now. But in response to that, basically the way that I believe that you approach things is one battle at a time. And that works across the board for any kind of issues that you're talking about. And yes, we do all have struggles with how certainly anybody who works within any kind of city council understands some of the dilemmas about the way that things get developed, and certainly many of the people who are here in this room are advocating for a stronger desire to have better practice in developments. So, but that again is another issue, and the ban is a very important one. How it gets enforced is a secondary issue. But I think that basically once you get that on board, I think it's really, it'll start to take flight, and then you can start engaging in more dialogue, and I think the dialogue is really important between all the parties. Anyway, I would like to offer the mic up to another individual, and thank you for coming with your comments.
My first point is just to touch on a previous one. I've got a friend who's a professor at Memorial who studies public policy, and according to her, Newfoundland has traditionally been a laggard in adopting certain public policy, so that may clarify. But I also think that the provincial government can sit around and twiddle their thumbs till cows come home, but it's going to be a loud, vocal voice that will get the ball rolling. So we can sit here and we can talk about this, that, and everything else, but until we speak very loudly, they won't listen. The second point I want to make is the rebuttal that Health Canada made to the report that the Ontario College of Family Physicians released. I want to know if you can just clarify what an industry-driven study is and the problems that, or the failure of the Health Canada study in regards to the pesticides.
Sure. Are people clear on that? So within Health Canada, there's an agency called the Pest Management Regulatory Agency, PMRA, and it's their job to register or not register proposed pesticides for Canada. Only if they're registered by PMRA can they be used and sold in Canada. PMRA has been critical of some of the work we have done, and so we have responded. And the concern that we have about PMRA is the following, that when they look at a proposed pesticide for registration, they look at industry-supplied studies. So if you're Monsanto or Bayer and you want to bring a pesticide to Canada, you go to the PMRA and you say, here are the studies that we think show that this is acceptable. And so PMRA doesn't do their own research. They don't go to third parties. They get industry-supplied research. Well, we think that's a big problem because the very people who are asking for the registration are supplying the research. So that's a big concern. The second concern is that part of PMRA's funding comes from the industry because industry has to pay fees to get these registrations done. So that also strikes us as a bit of a conflict of interest. Another concern we have is that PMRA just looks at animal studies. When they're considering whether or not to register a pesticide, they look at animal studies, what are called toxicological studies. They don't, for the most part, look at human studies, studies of how these things affect people, epidemiological studies. That's a big concern too, because the way rats process poisons is different from the way people do. Rats have mechanisms within their bodies that are more able to neutralize some of these poisons, things that we don't have. So it's dangerous to make extrapolations, conclusions from rat studies about how these things are going to affect us. And the final concern we have about the pest management regulatory agencies, they look at these ingredients one at a time. They look at one chemical at a time. But that's not the way human life works. As human beings, we're exposed to these things in combination, many of them at once. And typically, when you put down a pesticide formulation, you're getting a number of these chemicals all at once. You're not getting them individually. So we don't think the studies that look at them individually really give you a rich picture, an accurate picture of how these chemicals affect people who get them in combination. So we have some real problems, in short, with the way the Pest Management Regulatory Agency looks at pesticides, and therefore, frankly, we don't particularly trust their conclusions about the safeness, and I use quotation marks, of some of these products. By the way, PMRA doesn't call the product safe. They say that the risk is acceptable. That's the bar that these products have to pass. Do the products represent an acceptable risk? And what we and the other health organizations say is no, they don't represent an acceptable risk because they don't have any health benefit, these chemicals, and they're linked with cancer and reproductive effects and neurological illness. So they have no health benefits and lots of risk. On balance, we don't think they are acceptable. Sorry, long answer, but probably important to know if we're going to have a full discussion.
Probably just want to repeat too, like if Health Canada says it's fine, that may not be to say that it's fine.
Right.
Because they're bound by NAFTA. PMRA may not be what they profess to be. So
that's right. Yeah. There are lots of products in Canada that are legal but not safe. Cigarettes are the best example of all. Very legal and very unsafe.
Okay, yes.
This reminds me a little of a saying that I often use. Why do you continue to bang your head against the brick wall? Because it feels so good when I stop. I keep banging my head quite often in different aspects of my life. But yeah, a little at a time we get a brick up. I would remind Councillor Tessier that even though it's a provincial thing, we do have motor registration in Mount Pearl. We can probably change the license. Okay?
I like the way you think.
Okay.
Pesticide-free zone on your license plate.
Yeah, pesticide-free. I don't know if we get away with that. We could always try it. I just want to try to clarify something from Councillor Tessier. I believe you said earlier that Mount Pearl didn't want to change anything because you didn't want to sort of do it piecemeal. Is that correct?
Well,
or I just want to get a clarification on that.
No, it wasn't. We said that there's two sections in provincial legislation that were cloudy, that we could probably slip underneath with this.
Right.
But again, it would end up in court, and it was very loose. I'm going to see if I can find it here now to tell you, because there's two. Oh, here we go. There's two sections that could be considered as potential for the control and the banning of pesticides. There's subsections EE and PP of Municipalities Act. And one is a nuisance regulation,
Yeah.
which would be a challenge, but again, if you could make it gray enough. And the other one